All right, so that was Doug Jones earlier today, right after he voted. Now I'm joined by Mike O'Neill, a political analyst, to kind of guide us through tonight and maybe what we can expect. So, lots of implications tonight here.
Well, there certainly are. From the standpoint of the national politics, the implications are that if the Democrats win, they pick up a seat. It flips from 52 to 48 to 51-49. Now, it doesn't probably impact the immediate discussions over the tax cuts and the like, because it turns out that you might think that a victor takes office right away, but it has to be certified, and that's probably going to take a month. So you're still going to have 52-48 until the first of the year, roughly. And so all of the stuff we're hearing about now, tax cuts or not, that's going to be handled by the existing Senate.
Okay, and so this has been a campaign really that we've been seeing that if you thought you knew it, wait 5 minutes because something's about to change.
Well, I mean, you could hardly envision a more blockbuster announcement than the charges against Judge Moore, which are numerous and credible. On the other hand, this is about as solid a Republican state as there is. We think of Arizona as being of this character. Well, Alabama is that on steroids. So if Judge Moore wins, it's for one reason. He has an R next to his name. And that may be all you need. Now, the question, what will be solved by this, is there some limit beyond which that's not good enough? Because if this doesn't cross that threshold, I don't know what does.
Yes, yeah. And I saw from some reports, they said that tomorrow, if Roy Moore wins tonight, that the GOP senators are having a special meeting tomorrow.
Oh, yeah. If Moore wins, this is not over.
No.
Because then the Republicans have to decide, are they going to seat him? You know, and they have that will tear the party apart. That will be a very, very tough choice because I think that if they seat him, they're going to have to own him, and that's going to be very, very difficult for them moving forward into 2008. So you could see Moore win. The Republicans refuse to seat him. And it is a Republican Senate,
yes,
you know.
Yes.
The Democrats will vote, but the Republicans have a majority. So they refuse to seat him, then we start all over. And I'm convinced if that happens, if you have another election, you'll have another primary, you'll have another candidate, and the Republican will win.
Wow. So much to really think about here as we're going to continue on right here on News Now. But when you think about it, though, you're right. If Moore wins, I mean, the fighting is going to happen almost immediately.
Yeah, the discussion will certainly be immediate, and then the Republican leadership is going to have a problem. What do we do? They're either going to have to own this guy, or they're going to have to reject him. And owning him is going to be a very difficult and problematic thing for them. Rejecting him and not seating him is an extreme measure that's only been taken on a handful of times in our history. Yeah. Mostly, by the way, in terms of refusing to seat Confederate senators who were part of a rebellion that became the Civil War. Most of their failure, the refusal to seat, have been in that of that character.
Yeah, I was seeing the last time was during the Civil War era.
I didn't know if it was the last time, but the vast majority of cases, of which there's only been a handful, have been from that era.
Wow. And then another side of the coin to look at, too, if Doug Jones wins, be the first time since, 1992?
88, I think.
88.
But, by the way, in 1988, the fellow who was elected was Richard Shelby, who was elected as a Democrat.
Oh, wow.
A very conservative Democrat. Now, the interesting thing, I went back and looked at the Alabama history of voting for the Senate. Until that flip, Alabama was the most solidly Democratic state in the Union. I mean, going back to the early 1800s, since there was a Democratic Party, it was always Democratic until, frankly, the last residual of the Civil Rights Act.
Wow.
Civil Rights Act passed. Lyndon Johnson said, we've lost the South for a generation. He underestimated it. We're running on our third generation now. And what happened was the state and most of the South started electing Republicans to lower office but they had this residual of Dixiecrat senators and representatives who got elected for a while. And over time, and it was really into the 90s when that became untenable, the parties realigned along completely ideological grounds, and they started electing all Republicans, including the case of Richard Shelby, first elected as a Democrat, saw which way the wind was blowing, became a Republican, has been consistently reelected ever since.
Well, there we go. Wow. And do you think the Democrats have sort of set this up as far as to really force Moore out, though, if he wins, because they've already forced Franken to resign?
Yeah,
so are they setting the building blocks?
Well, there's certainly a relationship there. I think that any fair-minded person that looks at the situation of Al Franken and Judge Moore, Franken's offense, whatever they were way, way less. Mm-hmm. So one of a couple of things happened. Either the Democrats are cutting their own throats by applying a more rigid standard to themselves and just losing a seat potentially. And by the way, Minnesota's not a safe Democratic seat. Minnesota is very close to a swing state. In contrast to Alabama, if you throw out Judge Moore, you get another Republican.
Yeah.
They'll have another election, it'll be a little disruptive, but you will get another Republican elected. So on the other hand, you could look at this and say what the Democrats are trying to do is set themselves up as the party that is pure on these issues. And they're going to go into the 2018 election with a very, very strong appeal to women on a moral issue. And the Republicans will be in a very difficult position. They'll have to be against sexual abuse and all that. But look at the guy you seated. Look at is this your poster child for the Republican Party? They're going to have that hanging around their neck. Win or lose, I mean, they're going to have that. They've endorsed this guy. Half the Republican establishment's endorsed him. The other half isn't. For example, Senator Shelby said, I wouldn't vote for him. The Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee recently went all in on Judge Moore. So there's a split there.
Yes.
And it's a difficult situation. I wouldn't be surprised to see Moore win. The Republicans refuse to see. This is sort of the tactically best deal for them. He wins. The Republicans refuse to seat him. They therefore reject him, and then they get another Republican. I think the governor probably appoints another interim, who probably ends up being Lester Strange again or somebody like that. Certainly, he's a very conservative Republican, notwithstanding. And they ultimately win the election. In other words, this is the only guy that a Democrat in the state of Alabama would have any chance against. And it's a toss-up.
Yeah, it really is a toss-up at this time. We're still waiting for some of those early returns to come back here. But do you think we're on almost a slippery slope, though, as well as with Roy Moore, he's heavily denied these accusations against him, where Franken, he's owned up to him. There was pictures. Yeah. But for Roy Moore, if he wins, it almost seems like they want him out of there before he's even sat down.
Yeah, I think there is a difference. Now, obviously, neither one has run its course. They're both last minute.
Yes.
But what I know about these accusations against Moore is they were not sought out by political operatives, which the Franken case was. They were independent. They were sought out by journalists. They were women who weren't particularly interested in coming forward, who got basically urged by journalists who did I think it was the Washington Post initially did the reporting. They said, listen, you really should do it. They got talked into coming out. And they are completely independent of one another. These stories are very credible. I mean, I can't imagine them not being true because of the way they came about. They're completely independent. The Franken stuff, to talk about it in the same breath, to me seems ludicrous. Basically, a lot of it was sort of the category of horsing around. Inappropriate for a senator. Probably pretty common fare for a Saturday Night Live comedian. So he's had a career shift.
Yeah.
And also it had the aura of a setup. The original woman was a frequent guest of Sean Hannity, and my God, Roger Stone was the guy who did it, who's about as dirty politics as it come, going back to Watergate. So that one had all kinds of suspicious fingerprints on it.
And it almost seems like the perfect storm right now with this whole Me Too movement that we've really been seeing within the last couple of months. I mean, it started on the Hollywood side with Weinstein, and it kind of then sprawled its way into the politic arena
and
as well.
I think that's the danger when we look at this. You look at these things. The Weinstein case was horrific. I mean, criminal and just despicable.
Yes.
And then I think if we don't watch it, we lose the ability in some of these individual cases to say, well, this maybe shouldn't have done it, but is this of the same order of magnitude of severity? I think, we have to look at all these things individually. Even though we might not approve of any of them, you might recognize that, it's sort of like if I punch you in the face, that's a bad thing. But if I shoot you in the head, that's like way worse. It's all bad stuff, it's all violence, but it's not all exactly the same.
Yeah. And now for some of the more supporters, they really have to respect the Me Too movement, but can they also bring up maybe a fact of a why now movement? Why it's seeming like 40 years, 30 years, these allegations now just coming out? Well, can they almost have that kind of
Well, obviously that's some of the argument that's been made. But again, I'd look to why now? Because the Washington Post went down and chased down a lot of these rumors. Why did they do so? Because this guy's running for the U.S. Senate. Yeah. If he's only a local official in Alabama, that's not the purview of the Washington Post. So I think that there's an explanation for the why now on that.
That's good insight.
And frankly, other than just saying it's not true, I haven't heard him. Frankly, he's ducked out of sight for the last 5 days. He's been MIA on his own campaign. I think he's deciding that R next to his name may be enough to pull him through, and he's been completely inaccessible to the press. Because if he gets in front of the press is going to ask questions that he doesn't want to answer. Sure. So he's hoping just to hang on long enough, I think, to get through this and get elected. And from the stuff, some of the stuff I've seen, I saw this one focus group with Frank Luntz, frankly, that was just riveting. His supporters, it's like they were impervious to facts. They just dismiss it all out of hand. They're viscerally connected to him and just immediately dismiss everything. If he wins, it'll be that core constituency of people who essentially, I've got a party identification. I'm a conservative Republican. That's who I vote for. Period.
There it is.
That's his key to victory is straight party ID.
So straight for that R and see how long it can last, really.
Well, how much can it withstand is the real question.
Yes.
And I'm sure every Republican in Washington is wishing they had anybody but him on the top of the ticket, because anybody but him on the top of the ticket, and you'd have a non-controversial victory.
It'd be a runaway.
It'd be a runaway, absolutely.
All right, and then say if he does win, and then they don't seat him, and then there would have to be another election. What do you think that does, though, to the voters in Alabama? Would it even be a less of a turnout the next time? Because they'd be like, I wanted my guy, he's not in.
First of all, I think what would happen is he would lose in a primary, and then there'd be extremely low turnout because it would be a foregone conclusion of a victory for the Republican.
Yes.
Whoever it is, and I say that without knowing who it is. Could be Lester Strange, could be somebody else. Frankly, could be anybody with an R next to their name who, hasn't dated teenagers. That's about it. This is there's no contested elections statewide in the state of Alabama. I said, it wasn't the last Democrat that won with Shelby was a very conservative Democrat, was a holdout. He flipped. I mean, it's been well over a generation since any Democrat has won statewide in Alabama. And as much as we think Arizona is a one-party state, we've had Democratic governors, we've had assorted people. Now, currently we have a clean sweep of Republicans, but it's not so overwhelming that it's considered, beyond contemplation that a Democrat could win. A Democrat has to beat the spread here by about 8 points, and that's a very tough haul, but it's doable. Alabama's like 30 points, and it's not doable, short of an extraordinary situation like this. I mean, the closest analogy I can think of in Arizona is many years ago, there was a congressional race, safe a Republican district, East Valley district, and held by a Republican who got caught up in the check-kiting scandal. Sam Coppersmith, Democrat, was the sacrificial candidate. You always run somebody just in case something happened.
Yeah.
Sam won one term in Congress because there was just a huge scandal and people are upset about it. The next year, the Republicans put up, I think, John McCain actually for that seat, and he won the seat in Congress. The rest is history.
Wow. Now, do you think a lot of Republicans today are secretly thinking, oh, I hope he doesn't win more?
It would certainly, I think they're conflicted. It would certainly make life simpler for them. They don't have to deal with the ethics problem, and oh my God, are we going to refuse to seat a duly elected person is a really big deal. You know, as we said, it either mostly was done in the Civil War era, or maybe, as you suggested, not done at all since. I don't know whether there was another. If there was another case or two, it's very rare.
Wow.
And extraordinary. So that is an extraordinary thing, and I'm sure they're not looking forward to having to deal with that issue. On the other hand, do they want to seat him and have to have that? So it would simplify things for them. They would not be happy about the loss of one seat, 51-49, and all of a sudden, instead of needing 3 senators to depart to not get something through, you only need 2, because they have the vice president. So all they need is 50. So 51-49, they could still lose 1 senator, but they can't lose 2. Right now, they can lose 2. You know, so we're going from you can lose 2 to, or right now you can lose 2. If this flips, they can only lose 1. So
a lot to think about
on issues like the tax cut. That could be the difference between winning and losing.
Wow! And when we talk about all eyes on Alabama, it seems like pretty soon it'll be all eyes on Arizona. When you figure in Flake is resigning, he's
not running again.
Not running again, and then. Who knows with the status of the health for McCain?
Well, here's I think what's significant about Arizona and the Flake seat is that the Democrats actually have a very small chance of picking up the Senate. They have to keep all of their seats, many of which, about 10 of which, are in states that Trump carried. That only gets them exactly where they are. They have to pick up 2 more seats. The most 2 likely are Nevada and Arizona. Arizona, I think it depends on who wins the primary. Kelly Ward wins the primary, I think all bets are off. She could be very vulnerable.
That's very interesting to think about too. Is you got to think about Arizona in the mix as well. If you're just joining us, everyone, I'm Mike Pace, joined by Mike O'Neill, political analyst, as we are talking about that special election, Alabama, where who would have thought that this would have been such a national conversation when it should have been, if you think about it, just a runaway.
Well, yeah. I mean, in any normal election, it's a runaway.
Would it have been like by 30 points?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it would have been so big that you wouldn't even hardly bother to count the votes.
Yeah, it would have been automatic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And this is not what we're having though tonight. It's so much different.
It's hard to envision a worse set of accusations. So this is the extreme case that happens once in a great while, and throws out the traditional rules.
And that bombshell report from the Washington Post came out November 9th. So think about where we came. So from November 9th to the 12th right now, it seems like longer than a month, though.
You know, it's interesting. They say it was last minute. It probably would have hurt him more if it had come out a month or 2 before that, because what Moore's been able to do is just duck the press for a little over a month.
Yes.
I don't know that he could have done that for 2 months.
Yeah, yeah.
It's all not true, and then just leave town. I think he's hanging on by a thread in terms of possibly getting through this.
I thought it was interesting last Friday when the Moore team didn't seem to jump more on the fact of when we had the news from last Friday about the yearbook accuser when she admitted that she added a date. I thought for sure that camp would have really pressed hard.
I thought they did.
But all they did was like a 5-minute presser.
And it's sort of like you've got these multiple accusations, and there was one thing about one of them. Yeah, of course, you want to make that one the issue. You know?
Yeah.
And I don't think they even said, they didn't say that the whole annotation wasn't his, but that she added one word to it or something.
Yeah.
But, you know, if people aren't paying a lot of attention, it's like, oh, yeah, they're not true. You found something that wasn't true. Well, you know, if you have 8 or 9 accusations like this, and one of them is shaky, you still got all the rest which haven't been touched.
Yes. So wow.
But if you're not paying a lot of attention, you just get, well, maybe this is questionable now. Especially if that's what you want to believe.
Yeah.
So that's what happens. If you are a conservative Republican, you're looking for a reason to vote for more. You're really upset about this stuff that you hear, and you really want it not to be true. So give me a thread of evidence that I can hang on that says maybe it's a setup or maybe it's not true, and then I can go do what I want to do anyway.
Yeah.
That's what I think. That's how that would operate.
Sure.
It isn't going to flip any Democrats or independents, but you know, there's a majority in Alabama of conservative Republicans who want to vote for Judge Moore. Just give them enough of a thread to go on.
Yes. Now, did you think it was interesting? Yesterday, Fox News had the poll out where they showed that Doug Jones was up by 10 points. What did you think of that?
What did I think? The polls are all over the map.
Yeah.
The Fox poll is a good one, actually. But it's sort of like, I don't hang my hat on, and I've been doing polls for 40 years.
Yeah.
And I've been watching them for that long. If you look at all the polls, they run from about plus 10 to minus 10. And there are differences by methodology. Normally, the gold standard is a telephone interview poll, live interview. That's what the Fox poll was. There is some suggestion that maybe this is one of those rare instances where people aren't willing, they don't want to admit to a live person they're voting for more because of the nature of the allegations. Yes. And so maybe some of the other methods, robopolls or computer things, are more accurate in this case. Those other polls normally have other far more severe methodological problems that get very technical, but they are, in general, they are inferior. But maybe in this one instance, if there really is, and this is talked about a lot, you know, historically, they called it Bradley effect and all that, and it made its way into the public discourse. There hasn't been a documented case of that effect having occurred any time in the last 30 years. Maybe this, however, is the one thing.
Yeah.
You know, what the Bradley effect is, says if there's a socially desirable answer that you could tell that one of the answers would be embarrassing for you to give to a live person, people may be less willing to do that in front of a person. Maybe, now that's been discussed all over the place, even in the case of Bradley, black guy ran for governor of California, and the polls seemed to overstate his support, and they said, well, these are people when they got they got in the privacy of their voting booth, they voted against him, but they want to say they're voting for. Actually, the evidence is that isn't even what happened in that instance.
Wow.
But people have forgotten that. So there has been really no instance of that effect, which doesn't mean that in some extreme circumstance, I mean, we're talking about basically child molesting, right?
Those are the accusations,
this may be that extreme circumstance where some people want to vote for more, will vote for more, but really don't want to say so publicly.
Okay.
That's the theory behind this, and that's the argument, at least, why maybe in this instance, some of the non-interviewer-based polls may be better in this instance. That's just conjecture. There's enough stuff out there to talk about polling in general. Polling is way harder in the primary than it is in the general, and it's way harder than that in a special election. So this is the worst case. And then you throw in all this scandal business that may trigger social desirability as a criteria. We're on uncharted territory. I've looked at, there was even one of the problems with the robopolls is that they get very low response rates, and so they jigger with the numbers based on a variety of assumptions. There was one analyst who did a robopoll like this, and then they ran it through 10 different simulations based on 10 different sets of assumptions.
Yeah.
They got, with one poll, they got 10 different answers.
Wow.
Which range from one guy winning, which range from a Moore victory to a Jones victory. So you put it all together, I mean, you mentioned the Fox poll. That is the most positive indication for Jones
Yes.
out there of all the polls. Generally speaking, most of the polls that were done did not use traditionally good methodology. The Fox poll and several others did, 3 or 4 out of the 20 or 30.
Yeah.
Under normal circumstances, I would place much greater weight on those. In this instance, there's this other element, and you really, you know, we're going to collect another data point today that we really haven't seen in a long time.
Yes.
So anybody's guess. I mean, I've seen some early indications, and I'm very reluctant about this because a lot of these are anecdotal, often wrong, talking about how turnout may be up in some of the urban areas, which would be very good for Doug Jones. But that's conjecture, and a lot of times that early information about what's going on with turnout and whatever turns out to be wrong, flat out
sure.
wrong. You know, you talk to somebody and they say, oh, there's big crowds
Yes.
here or there, and turns out that it was somebody looked at one crowd, or somebody didn't show up at one of the polling places, and so they only had 3 judges instead of 5, so things are going slowly. I mean, all kinds of things
Yes.
can happen until we start getting some hard data. The thing to watch when they start coming in, there are 4 major urban areas in Alabama, and Doug Jones has to run up huge margins in those areas with high turnout, because he's going to get whumped in the rural areas.
All right.
So, and if it's like most places, the urban areas come in first. So you're going to not only have to see a Jones lead, I think you're going to have to see a big Jones lead. Otherwise, it doesn't look good for him. So.
All right, so a lot of things have to happen for Doug Jones, it seems like, in that deep red state for him to pull it out. Well,
a lot of things have happened.
Yeah,
That's just
there
it.
you
I
go.
mean, this was beyond probably his wildest
Yes.
expectations of things that could happen that would help him. The question is, on the other hand, this is a deeply, deeply red
Deep red.
state. Even that may not be enough. I put it all together, and I got to tell you, I think total coin flip.
All right.
Yep.
Well, we will see you later tonight. Looks like we have some supporters there at the Roy Moore camp speaking right now. Thank you so much, Mike O'Neill, for coming on and really giving us this insight to guide us through this very special election tonight. Let's go take you out to the Roy Moore camp. It looks like they're going to have some more speakers.